football. Today, I have with me Nick Shepkowski. And Michael, can you say your last name for me? Because I know I'm going to butcher it on the spot.
Palkovics.
There it is. I need to get that written down because I'm a very phonetic person, but
it is phonetic. It's phonetic. It looks challenging, but it's Palkovics. Very phonetic.
Okay. I'm notorious for butchering names, so whenever I just
get, and you're a teacher. How can you do that?
I've got
calls everybody sport, kid, champ. Doesn't have to worry about it. Doesn't have to worry about mispronouncing the name. A nickname for everybody. Good job there, champ. There, bud.
Exactly.
Bill, you're Bill today. I don't care what your name is.
Oh dear. So anyway, no use I don't know, skirting around the issues here. Let's dive right in. And I don't know. Let's just start very, very broad. I got a million ways that I could go with this podcast, as I'm sure all three of us, if either of you two were sitting in the hosting seat, it could go a million different ways as well. Nick, let's start with you. Just to go left or right here, but give me your general, what you're mad about, I guess, or your thoughts in terms of Saturday's very weird, never thought in a million years it was going to be this bad 24-13 defeat at the hands of Cincinnati.
It's weird. A million things to get mad about. Obviously, the result first and foremost. The fact you're down 17-0 at halftime. The inexcusable interception by Jack Cohn at the end of the first possession, where you think that that's a throw that a sophomore in high school makes, not a fifth-year grad student, not a grad senior makes. Tyler Buckner makes that throw. Drew Pine makes that throw. Okay, well, it's the inexperience. A veteran wouldn't do that. No, it's god awful. I don't care that if it was a delayed blitz and the linebacker was only coming because Kyron Williams stayed in the backfield. That's something down, no situation, know that you need to get points there. Don't just toss the ball up to nobody and have it picked off. It's inexcusable. And it felt to me like the game, it almost felt like the 2011 South Florida game, if you remember how that started. Sure, it wasn't returned for a touchdown, but it felt like you were playing from behind the entire rest of the day, even though they kept the score scoreless for another, 18 minutes, 19 minutes of game time, whatever it was. It felt like because of that missed opportunity, it felt like you were already down 3 or 7-0 right off of the bat, right out of the chute, and felt like you were playing from behind the entire afternoon. And just, can somebody step up and make a play? Anyone out there. You had to wait until the second half when Drew Pine comes off the bench, tries to be the spark plug for this offense that is just inept. I think that a lot of us thought that, okay, it's going to take a step back. There's going to be some growing pains without Ian Book, the difference of a quarterback. Okay, but it's not going to be bad by any means. This offense is atrocious. You can't trust it to do anything. And then the one decision, I guess, that I was most upset about, the one single thing, is when they do make the decision to go to Drew Pine in the second half. And he comes out just like he did against Wisconsin, drives the ball downfield, gets to the Cincinnati 35, 1st and 10. He's got a hot hand. However the heck he comes off the bench, he's got a connection with the receiver. Let's go force Tyler Buckner in again. Why? What? You run it down, quarterback keeper up the middle, get stuffed at the line of scrimmage. You're sitting 2nd and 10, and then you act surprised that the quarterback with very little experience in Pine is out of rhythm with his receivers immediately after for the next 3 downs. Shocking. I know. Who would have ever thought? I'm sure it's just a strange coincidence that happened. But it was an afternoon full of things that just left you wondering. I guess the disappointment, those are just a couple of the things. But just someone step up and make a play. Offensively, defensively. I know Cam Hart, we've talked about him a lot. He got his hands on a couple of errant throws there. Thought he was going to walk away with a couple interceptions. You saw Cincinnati, the difference of getting a hand on the ball and actually picking the pass off. And you see what the end result was.
Mike, how about you?
Well, exactly what Nick was saying, the Cohn pick. The thing that frustrated me about the Cohn pick was what you stated, which is the obvious. But if you watch that replay, which I went back and rewound that play 3 or 4 times during the commercial, George Takis was wide open in front of his face. He was moving to the right. I know he was getting pressured. I get it. There were hands on him. But he was moving to the right, and George Takis was running in front of him. He could have floated that ball the same way he floated to try to get it to Kevin Austin past two defenders, and Takis was right in front of him. I don't know if Takis is just disregarded in the offense because he's not even utilized at all. His presence on the field is I don't know what it is, what value it provides. I'm confused on that.
Sure as hell not in blocking.
Blocking. I forget who put it out there. It was a still picture of Cone with Williams to the right and Tyree to the left. And the caption was, I've been waiting all season for this. Little did I know it was going to be for additional blocking. We had to bring Williams and Tyree in to have 7 blockers with Cone on the field. And it's not an indictment on Cone. Cone obviously has his flaws, but when you have to do that, there's an issue, and it's not your quarterback. Having said that, the one thing you thought you can count on with Cone was fifth-year senior experience, smart decision-making. He can do things with the ball down the field. I heard a statistic. Last 3 games, he's 2 of 13 on passes that travel more than 20 yards in the air down the field. So where's that element that he was supposed to be bringing? Then he makes this horrible decision on 2nd and goal when he took how many sacks this year? You couldn't take that one? I mean, come on.
You're getting hit either way.
Exactly. The Buckner thing, like, okay, I know the two of you know, Ben, you watched it a day later. I know you know he's running the ball. I think I saw a statistic. I think he's run 37 plays. Something like 33 of them have been runs. And of the 33, he's kept it like 20. When the number is too obvious, he's going to run. And then when he does get the opportunity to pass or is put in a situation where he has to throw the ball, he obviously looks uncomfortable. He's not ready for it. So we're sitting here with an immobile quarterback who supposedly has a good arm. Then we're sitting here with a very mobile quarterback who questionable pass plays. Then we have a quarterback who can do both things in a very, I don't say successful, but like acceptable way. And he's the one getting the short end of the stick, and it makes no goddamn sense. And the thing that frustrated the most when you talk about halftime, if you guys learned, Pine wasn't told he was going to be starting the second half till they were on the field out of the locker room. That frustrated me if you're going to do that, wouldn't you want to sit him down and discuss, hey, here's the deal. We're down 17-0. Here's what I want to do. I want to put you in the game, but hey, we can get back in this game. You want to give him the mindset of what you're trying to accomplish by getting back in this football game. Not, hey, right before you get the ball, by the way, you're starting. Like, he came out of the locker room thinking he's going to be holding his helmet. It's just, that bothered me. And you can't blame the defense. You can't blame the defense. I know there's things that they didn't do perfectly, but they literally had to play a perfect, flawless game. We got to the point where we're relying on them to make the points.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
an issue.
The one thing that I will say about the defense is, and what you get handed, Cincinnati puts up 15 total yards of offense in their first two scoring drives to go up 10-0. When you do have the defensive possession just before halftime, and you've got a minute and 40 that Cincinnati gets the ball, if you can make one stop all year that you don't let a team just keep them out of the end zone. Even don't let them make it a 3-score game just before halftime, and you let them go 80 yards that quickly. I mean, pretty effortlessly. In fact, that was the one thing. It's like of all times for this to happen, that felt like whatever air was in the balloon just went out. And Drew Pine somehow got a little bit more in it in the second half, but that was
the pass that made it 17 was a terribly thrown ball that Kyle Hamilton played the route where it was supposed to go. That's why he looked out of position, because he was in position for a corner route, and it was so severely underthrown that he looked foolish. And I'm like, that wasn't his fault. He was playing where the quarterback should have thrown the ball. And to add on to your point, the other possession that they needed was the one that made it 24.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that. But where are you at, Ben? What did you see that we haven't touched on yet?
I was kind of wondering when you two were gonna bring me back in. No, yeah. To I don't know, to add to the things that you're saying, not a whole lot different, but just I can't remember which of you said this first, but you get down to on the first drive there, you got a goal to go situation from like the 5, and you run a read option with Jack Cohn in the game. That just made me mind-numbingly angry. And then you get the pick on the next play. I mean, if there's ever a time to use Tyler Buckner, it's in that obvious read option type of, you got 5 yards to go. So how bad can you screw this up? He loses one. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I thought Tyler Buckner was going to be used in short yardage type plays like that. You saw Cincinnati ran, early on in the game, they ran an RPO where Ritter hit Michael Young for 3-4 yards and a first down. Like, it's those types of plays that I sort of thought Buckner would see more of. And the frustrating part is, early on against, I think Toledo was when he got his first action. He ran some of those RPOs where there was a read and a throw. And now it's like he doesn't even have that anymore. Now it's like it's just the read and the run, and that's all he gets. That's the part that really, I don't know. It's like I've been pounding the table, like, let the kid throw a couple, like get him a couple high percentage, like throws down the field, even a 5-yard out, a 8-yard hitch route, whatever it is, let him throw a couple high percentage throws, because right now he's ineffective. The way they're using him right now, there's no need. He shouldn't see the field the rest of the year. If that's all you're going to do with him. Now, I mean, if you transition, I guess, to, I don't know, to a Drew Pine, and this is kind of where I think this team needs to go now is, Drew Pine needs to be the guy. And, in certain times, maybe you give Buckner a drive that's like an actual drive. But while they're out there fancy pantsing around, while they're down, they're against a top 10 opponent and things haven't been working, I don't really know. That's the part that gets me. In addition, and like I say, I don't remember which one of you said this, but talked about, two backs back for extra protection so that they have 7 blockers. Like, how many times did they do that in the first half? And they got 3 guys running routes against Cincinnati's dropping 6 or 7 dudes. Like, what do you... Is this rocket science? Like, am I crazy for thinking, just sitting at home? And like, I've had some strong opinions, especially today, since, today's the day I got to kind of catch back up and watch things. But like, there are people in my mentions, like, they're just basically like death threatening me, basically like, well, you don't know, you're not a coach. Like, you've never, like, where are your D1 offers to go coach? You're running a pass pattern with 3 dudes into 6 defensive backs because you can't block. Like, I don't know. Like, you don't have to be a football guru, X and O rocket scientist, Mad Hatter to figure out that this crap ain't going to work. So, and like I say, both of you already hit on it, so I don't need to make this point because, I've rambled on now for 3 minutes, but like, I don't know. You saw the offense was lifeless against Wisconsin. You got bailed out. You could have waterboyed it against Wisconsin and run the waterboy offense, which was to kneel 3 times, and you still would have won that game because the offense only scored, I don't know, 13 points, I guess, or whatever the heck it was, 20 points, I suppose. But you won that game because you got 2 touchdowns tacked on late in the kick return. Okay, awesome. You knew the offense was terrible, and under Cohn it was worse. You saw it against Wisconsin with Drew Pine coming in and what he could do. Why did it take all of halftime, all of the first half, to be like, maybe we should throw the guy in that moved the ball against Wisconsin the last time that we played a week ago? Like, I don't know. Again, it was probably lucky for me that I wasn't watching this. I wasn't watching this live because it would have taken years off my life. There was something to say about knowing what already happened that just let me just kind of sit there and just do one of these and just, oh my goodness, like I don't know, but I don't know. It's maddening, and I just feel like I shouldn't be mad about things that I've been mad about for the last 5 years at this point in the program, I suppose, because we're talking ahead of recording here that it's like we've seen this movie before. It's not perfectly fair to say that in year 12 that it should be better because you have a different team every year. There's truth to that. But at the same time, it's like, how many times do we make the same flipping mistakes as a program? And, I'm a Brian Kelly apologist. This is not a fire Brian Kelly rant, but it's just like, it's a coach better coaching staff. And I'm not even going to put it all on Coach Kelly either. It's a coach better rant. All right. Who wants to follow that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you look at it and you're right about the part with offensively. Do you blame the receivers? At times, sure, but what are you supposed to do when you're pretty much being everyone's double team because your pass protection sucks that bad, and when you're playing against a defense that pretty much has every guy double teamed? Like, am I supposed to be mad at Kevin Austin for that? No, I'm mad about Kevin Austin with the god awful drop that he had that could have really changed things there. Late in that was third quarter or fourth. I forget which quarter it was.
It was the fourth.
Fourth.
It was the fourth.
When they were they're down by 10. It was 17-7 at that point, and it would have been have the ball just short of midfield most likely. Instead, there you go, third down. Just catch the ball, get the first down. It's so important at that point. That's what I'd be mad about for that part. But it's I don't know if we're trying to grade or rank or list what the biggest issues are. I didn't want to buy into like kind of the narrative and the worry at the start of the year, but I mean, it seems like there's a Jeff Quinn problem, doesn't there? Like, what this offensive line is, it doesn't have. Forget the offense having identity. Like, this offensive line doesn't have an identity. Okay, well, you need to be able to 3rd and 15. You need to be able to give your quarterback. They can't pass protect. You can't trust them to pass protect. Okay, well, 3rd and 1. You're going to run behind so-and-so. No, you don't trust anyone to run behind against even mediocre defenses, let alone the really good ones. Like, it all starts up there. And I get it. You're replacing 4 guys that went to the NFL. Some drafted, some free agents undrafted-wise. But you're replacing pretty much an entire offensive line. And I know it's not going to be at the same level that it was a year ago. I don't care if your offensive line, you or not. But it shouldn't be one of the worst offensive lines and if not the worst offensive line in Group of 5 college football either. Like, it's a disaster, and it doesn't seem like it's getting a whole heck of a lot better. I think some of those things were able to be patchworked and worked around just enough in the Wisconsin game that got a lot of us feeling a little bit better than we probably should have. But I'm not seeing the progress. I'm not seeing the actual growth with this offensive line through the first 5 games that I thought we would start to see with a little bit of repetition, a little bit of playing together.
Well, the offensive line, the thing that frustrates me about that is it's got to be a Jeff Quinn problem because the entire offensive line, sans Kane Madden, is 4-star or better. Like, you can't tell me that, and I look at guys like Lugg and Baker and Carmody. Are you telling me that they didn't know that those guys were leaving and they were going to have the opportunity in 2021 to be a starter and play? So were they not mentally or physically or whatever preparing for that step? Was Jeff Quinn not in their ear a little bit about, hey, once Leichenberg and, Banks, once these guys are gone, you're the show. It looks like they had no idea, like, oh, it's my turn now. Like, they were so unprepared for it. And the offensive play, the lack of creativity and understanding that that's an issue. And I'm not saying you run a screen pass every play, but half of the screen pass is not blocking the defensive line. We can't do it to begin with. Why not take advantage of it? Because I don't care how good or bad your offensive line is. I'll take my chances on an offensive line guy popping a cornerback or a safety on a screen pass than trying to block a 285, 300-pound lineman. Let him go by. And again, you can't run it, 15 times a game, but we're not running it, in my opinion, enough. We should be running 5 screens a game. In that, somewhere 3 to 5 screens a game, we're running 1. Like, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can do it again. I promise you can. And but the lack of creativity, we're lining up like it's Newt Rockne days where we're better than you. We're going to line up and do a very simple off tackle, and our guys are better than your guys, and we're going to win the play. We're not there. we got to be a little bit different. I know it's Notre Dame, or we're not Boise State against Oklahoma. We have to run gimmick plays. But the fact of the matter is, we're kind of on the brink of that. And if you're not being creative, where's a counter? Where's a misdirection? Where's getting Lindsey and Tyree kind of, Lindsey in motion, Tyree coming off, and just something to move the bodies and eyes of the defenders. We're just lining up and thinking we're going to beat them to this. We're not. It's just not going to happen.
And you brought it up, but there was the play, I forget which drive it was. It was early in the game, and they do the end around. It was Tyree coming in motion.
To the short side of the field.
What is the thought process? Like, you're on the far hash. Why do you run it? Set the formation up opposite and run it to the far side. What are you doing? You want to get this guy in space. You saw a perfect example of it last week in a kick return. He makes one guy miss, and good Lord, look out. What do? You run everybody into a freaking bunch and say, good luck, Chris. Like, what? That one was so freaking maddening. When you see it go down, and as soon as he gets a hand up, it's like, why in the run it to the right, not to the left? Good Lord.
Yep. And in college, where the hashes are like, 3-4 yards wider than the NFL.
Oh, God. Yeah. Jesus, that was maddening.
Yeah. And speaking of Tyree, he gets it. He does his Rocket impersonation last week, and then this week can't even catch the damn ball.
Christ.
And by the way,
that's where defense stepped up. Was right after that.
I heard a pot.
That was huge to get a field goal there. Only allow a field goal there.
And I heard people giving Cincinnati credit. It literally said this like verbatim. And you got to credit Cincinnati with their special teams being able to get on that fumble. I'm like, that fumble, it was the equivalent of Chris Tyree catching it, then throwing it to them. I mean, he used his chest like a freaking brick wall to bounce off of. We can talk about that too in a minute, whenever you want to, Ben. The props Cincinnati's getting for something that I don't think they accomplished. But
believe me, I want to get there. But before we get there, I want to circle back to kind of something we were talking about a little bit ago. And that's the Jeff Quinn thing. I mean, Nick, you mentioned it. I mean, obviously the development's not there. Mike, you also, talked about, these are 4-star guys, some of them that with a lot of college football playing experience. I think back, what I feel like I'm watching in this year's team is and I'll sort of sound crazy for saying this, but let me explain. Like, this feels like 2016. Now, we're finding ways to win games at the end in a way we weren't in 2016. But, it's just kind of so in that way, the script is flipped. Like in 2016, we lost 8 games, and I think 7 of them were by a touchdown or fewer, I believe. 8 points maybe it was, or so. Fewer.
Yeah.
And it feels like the same types of things. Like if you listen to Brian Kelly after a game, are the same types of things. Now I know he said it his whole career here, but to use Jeff Quinn as an example, there's the quote that I think came out today. That's basically like, the criticism of Jeff Quinn is unwarranted. Okay. And to that, I sort of one of the biggest things about 2016 was, one of the criticisms of Brian Kelly was, he hires his friends. He's got this good old boy club of, and he takes care of his assistant coaches. And in that way, he must be a really great head coach to coach for. I get that. There's something to be said for that. This isn't a purely I don't know, that isn't all bad. But why do I sort of feel like Jeff Quinn is the offensive line coach here? Because he and Coach Kelly go way back to the Cincinnati days. And even the broadcast made the point that, when Coach Kelly left Cincinnati to take the Notre Dame job, Jeff Quinn was the acting head coach. I don't know. So really what worries me then is is Kelly is he going to be able to make a change here? Is there does he have the guts to make a change? I don't know. That's the part that does he look at this and be like, wow, there's a problem? Or does he look at this like, wow, I know Jeff Quinn. I've coached with him for a bunch of years. He's a really good coach. And he's going to figure this out. And here we are, and slamming our heads into the wall next year, the year after, right on down the road, the same way he did for Brian Van Gorder. There's somebody made the point on Twitter today that how good could have 2015 been if Brian Kelly would have just addressed the Brian Van Gorder problem? Well, how good could have this year been, or the years ahead that we don't know what they're going to look like exactly yet? Because I'm sorry, like Josh Lugg has been at freaking Notre Dame since like I was in middle school. It feels like, Kane Madden, All-American. I won't even touch him because he's a new addition this year.
Over.
Jared Patterson
fall backwards if you touch him.
The dump truck. Okay.
But like they've got these guys that have been here for half of forever, and they're just no good. They're just no good. Like how they're so woefully unprepared on the offensive line, like you guys were both mentioning, after having been in this program. And somebody even said today that I thought this was a good point. Like last year's offensive line was only good because they had Harry Heastand as a coach at one point in their career. So I don't know. Like I hate to I hate to like be a finger pointer at like one person or just like a group of person or just rail on one person or a group of people. But like, that's what it feels like. Like, holy crud. Like, I don't know. Like, have we learned nothing is really like what I keep coming back to. It's like, we've just learned nothing this whole time that, the whole tenure that Brian Kelly's been the head coach.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like you had to get, and remember in 2015, everyone had the concerns of Brian Van Gorder throughout that year. Sean Kaiser goes and puts together what would be one of the most historic drives in Notre Dame history, caps it with a go-ahead touchdown to Stanford with like 35 seconds left or whatever it was. All Van Gorder needs to do is just simply do something. And he goes and allows Stanford to march 40 yards downfield, kick the field goal as time expires, and goodbye college football playoff for 2015. And it wasn't even that got him fired. It was a disaster against a Texas team that sucked, let's face it, in 2016. That embarrassment. Okay, they got behind Nevada. Congratulations. A Michigan State team that ended up being no damn good, embarrassing his ass. And then Duke going and doing what Duke did. It wasn't like it was just the end of the year that it was like, okay, yeah, well, this is how close Notre Dame is. It's just a defensive coordinator change. Bleed into the next year, take away a third of that season and get off the disastrous start and set the tone for the rest of the year. Then the change had to be made. That's where my worry is I'm not asking for a job change in the middle of the year. I know Mizzou just gave up 62 points to Tennessee and they came back on Monday and fired their defensive line coach because they gave up like 900 yards rushing or whatever. Well, I'm not asking for that, but I also don't want to be sitting here in the middle of September, at the end of September, a year from now, having the exact same discussion of, all right, well, why the hell aren't things any better at this either? Like this is when you're looking at things that need to improve or reasons to, okay, if they're not going to the college football playoff, what are the key points and the key factors that you take from 2021 the rest of the way? Like, offensive line, you got to grow or you're going to be playing for somebody else a year from now.
Yeah. Not to talk about other teams, but one of the reasons I wasn't sold on the North Carolina hype was their offensive line. It was not good last year. And then here we are. The offensive line is the difference between us being 5-0. I mean, we're 4-0, but being 5-0, but just looking good this year. I mean, think about this. We are Saturday's game. Minus the Door missed extra point, which, by the way, apparently there was an article written that he missed his first one in his Notre Dame career and then made 126 consecutive extra points. Well, of course, he's going to miss one in the next game. That's just how that works. That's the rule. But we were 18 yards away from being in a tie game. I mean, the awful Buckner pick and then the Tyree fumbled kickoff led to 10 of their points. Obviously, the difference was 11, but again, the missed extra point. But it's almost like you said, Ben, in 2016, like if those things don't happen, and obviously they do, and you can't take it back and all that kind of stuff, but we could have easily won that game in spite of everything we are talking about, which is crazy to me. Like the only silver lining I can come away with is looking forward. I do feel like Cincinnati might be the best team we play all season in its entirety because they do have a pretty decent defense and they do have a quarterback that has skills. Like he's not the best, but he's not awful either. I just think in totality, as an overall team, Cincinnati might be the best team we play all season. So I guess if you're going to take the L and learn something from it, that's the team that it happens to. It's just unfortunate that it was an opportunity for Freeman and Kelly and Quinn even to be like, this is why we left Cincinnati and came to Notre Dame. And Cincinnati said, oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's Cincinnati just doing everything on Twitter afterwards too, like the old saying of "act like you've been there before."
Yeah,
good for them. They haven't been there before.
They never, yeah.
And some of the things they put on Twitter with the compilation of Brian Kelly thought pieces from his years at Cincinnati, and good for them. I mean, if Notre Dame wants to embrace being the villain, you better accept it when arrows get thrown your way, especially after you perform like you did on Saturday.
That's very true. I said some things. I've said some things about, I said some things about Cincinnati leading up to the game that if you could see my mentions right now from people, random Cincinnati fans that have somehow found me, it's a dumpster fire. Like it's I don't use the block button very often, but it's just relentless. Like I don't even respond, and I'm getting people just 5 and 6 mentions in there. Anyway,
I don't blame you. I don't blame you if you looked at, and I know Nick commented listening to my show, 5 for Nothing, 100 Nothing podcast. I literally spent like an hour going through their team, their games, and it almost came if it's not for obvious mistakes that you can't make, there's a very likely chance we win that game for all the reasons I said we would. We had to run for 3+ yards of carry. I wasn't asking for a miracle. I wasn't asking for 5 yards of carry. We just had to run the ball enough to be semi-effective, and I felt like at times it was, but they were vulnerable. I didn't think Desmond Ridder was that special. They were in close games against far inferior opponents, and we handed them the game on a silver platter. So you weren't wrong leading into that game to think that way. And it's just unfortunate that we did everything possibly we could do to make sure we didn't win that game.
Yeah, I don't know. Mike, you kind of mentioned this is what I would kind of want to touch on real quick. I mean, you mentioned that Cincinnati might be the best team we play. I hear that, and I don't know that I disagree. How much? I mean, I don't know. Like, there's been the argument, and this is kind of like the main argument when I mentioned my Twitter mentions being a dumpster fire. It's these comments that I've made. Mike, you and I talked, via text earlier that, is Cincinnati really even that good? Like, I mean, I know that they've got some talented guys, and I don't mean to insinuate that a top 10 team has no talent. As some Cincinnati fans were kind of trying to put words in my mouth whenever, as I was kind of talking about this earlier today. But like, this is Notre Dame. Like, I don't know, the talent level on the field. I mean, the depth at Notre Dame's got to be better at Cincinnati. Does Cincinnati have a couple starters that would start at Notre Dame? Heck yeah, they do. So, I mean, I don't mean to discount Cincinnati and say that like that they're just some dumpster fire of a team. Right now, the dumpster fire of the team is the one that you guys and I like. But I don't know. I didn't walk away from this game particularly impressed with Cincinnati. I mean, is that fair?
No.
And like, and just to kind of, I don't know, to wrap that thought, like, so is this the best team we play all year? And so should we be that worried? I don't know. Go ahead, Nick. I don't know. I mean, you getting at.
I think that Cincinnati is an interesting thing for me because kind of like a lot of the national discussion was surrounding Notre Dame last week was, okay, Notre Dame just won 41-13 against Wisconsin. They had this ridiculous fourth quarter, putting up 31 straight points. Are they good? And it's like, well, define what good is, because based off of some definitions of it, Alabama and Georgia are good, and everybody else in college football sucks. No, Notre Dame's not good by that measurement. If you're looking at a team that could be a fringe college football playoff team if things fell right, okay, in that sense that they're probably good. If you're looking at pretty much everything besides the offensive line and a shaky quarterback situation, Notre Dame's a really freaking good team. And I think Cincinnati, what you kind of look at with that, at least what stuck out to me is they know that they're not going to win a ton of shootouts against like Power 5 Power 5 squads or real kind of New Year's Six competitors or college football playoff contenders with that. They've built up a good defense. A very good defense, I should say. I don't want to like make it out to be like the freaking 85 Bears or the 70 Steelers or something, but it's a solid defense, especially their secondary. And a lot of the time, I think when you have to win based off your defense in the way that just kind of modern college football especially looks, you don't always get the praise and the love that you deserve necessarily. But I don't think Cincinnati was doing a whole heck of a lot that was like, oh my God, this is a defense that no one can score on. They were simply taking advantage of an offensive line that sucked and they could get a pass rush on. And they were taking advantage of Notre Dame really spotting them 17 points there in the first half. And okay, well, we're going to take our foot off the gas because we can and kind of sit back a little bit more in coverages because we can to not have to get beat over the top. And it's like, is it that they're not good or they took advantage of their right opportunities and then played a smart game at the end of the game too and made enough plays to win it? Like, I think they're good. I don't think they're any great shakes, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that they're going to be a team. Okay, well, maybe they go undefeated. I have no problem with them being in the college football playoff. I also don't want to hear people complaining they don't want to see Notre Dame again in a college football playoff game when they lose to Alabama or Georgia by 50 points.
Well, I guess
save your conversation of whatever happened in last year's Peach Bowl because that if they play Georgia again, it will not be as close as it was last year. But spoiler alert. Sorry.
And when I say they're the best, I just mean that their defense is good. And then from an offensive perspective, just like I said, in totality, because obviously UFC's defense is not good. You know, they have problems there. North Carolina's offense is clearly dysfunctional with their offensive line issues. So, and I just look, at our defense, which, I mean, tell me they didn't play good enough to win a football game on Saturday. You're never going to convince me otherwise. And you look at Desmond Ridder, like he played a great game. With the first 28 minutes of that game, going into that final drive, where again was finished off with an underthrown corner route that just happened to be luckily caught because Kyle Hamilton was playing the right pass route. But Desmond Ridder entered that final drive 7 of 18 for 45 yards. I don't consider that to be great football. Like, call me crazy, right? And if we had anything, a semblance of an offensive line or a quarterback who could make something out of nothing, which I think Drew Pine provides that element. But to your point, that once they got the 17-point lead, you didn't have to be special on defense. And, people were saying Desmond Ridder was he was the best quarterback in that game. I'm like, you're right, which that's not a hard thing to accomplish, by the way. Like, it wasn't difficult. It just was really frustrating. And for Cincinnati's defense, when you had Jack Cohn in there, or Buckner, you made it too easy because they're not bad. They've got good coaches. You're making it too easy. You can go balls out on a pass rush against Jack Cohn because should you misstep, he's not getting far. With Buckner, just follow Buckner. With Pine, people are like, oh, well, Pine had so much more time. The pass blocking must have improved. I'm like, no. The rush had to be a little bit more calculated because he had that threat. He had an Ian Book element to him. He reminds me of a poor man's Ian Book at this point in his career. I know it's only a few games and he's a sophomore, but he provides that run threat. And the issue, I think, is going to be understanding the passing game, which that was supposedly the reason he didn't get the start was the 1 4th down play where Lindsey went deep and Pine threw the out route. And then the drive that I have to only assume that he doesn't understand the 2-minute drill yet, because for the life of me, I'm screaming at my television. I damn near lost my voice. Why, with 5 minutes to go, down 11, we're running an offense that requires you to look back to the sidelines? Are you serious right now? Are you kidding me? Even if that drive went successfully, good luck having any time on the clock when you get the ball back. Because there were 3 possessions that were going to have to happen. We were going to have to get the ball, go down and score. Cincinnati was going to get the ball back. We're going to stop them and then get the ball again. 3 total possessions. And with 5 minutes to go, we were running the game as if we were still in the third quarter. Like, I didn't understand it. So I wasn't impressed with Cincinnati. We made it too easy for them in so many different ways. Their defense by giving them a 17-point lead, our offensive play schemes that made it easy for them to not have to think.
As I search kind of for a silver lining here, I think to myself, and to that point, like maybe now finally, and I can't even say this for 100% sure, which is scary. Like maybe now what you said just hit the nail on the head. He's like a poor man's Ian Book. And he's really only a poor man's Ian Book because you just haven't seen him play yet. Ian Book's the winningest, quarterback in Notre Dame history. Maybe Drew Pine's every bit of Ian Book, which just drives me nuts because, Ian Book's the guy that I know he wasn't a dynamic playmaker, throw it down the field type of a guy. And that kind of, hampered Notre Dame when they played better opponents. I get that. But I don't know.
How much would you kill for Ian Book right now?
Oh my God!
Like if you could have Ian Book right now versus what's out there,
we're 5-0.
You're 5-0, and you feel a hell of a lot better about. Like I don't know. Like I don't think you have to be an Ian Book apologist. Just kind of like the thing is about Pine. Everything you heard about him, even like in this past spring, without necessarily seeing practices. A lot of the way he was talked about, though, it just reminds me of the way Ian Book was. Ian Book gets recruited as kind of, okay, he gets the late scholarship offer. He's going to go to Washington State. He comes in. I know that Drew Pine was an earlier commitment to Notre Dame and didn't waver between somewhere else and Notre Dame eventually. But it's like, okay, when Book was recruited, the second that Phil Jerkovic commits, you forget about Ian Book. Yep, he's not part of the future. He's part of, just a stopgap guy, whatever. Wimbush is in front of me. It's going to take somebody's job. And he just kind of kept hanging around and finding a way to get on the field. And they started winning with him with regularity. And that's not even just to say that, okay, they are kind of built the same way, not necessarily deep ball throwers. They're going to have to be able to create with their feet a decent amount and kind of improv a decent amount. And that's what we've seen through with Pine here for a couple of weeks. But the way that he's talked about, look at the same similarities here with this of, okay, well, he might have been in line to start this year, but Jack Cohn comes in. Cohn's going to get handed the starting job. Tyler Buckner is a big-time recruit. Got to get him on the field and get him running repetitions right away. And it's all about the future with Buckner. It's just the stopgap year until Buckner takes over and it's his team. And it's like, all right, well, Drew Pine just kind of isn't going away. And his whole just kind of story and his demeanor so far. I mean, he does the McGregor walk after the touchdown pass last week, which is badass. Like, I don't care what you do. He cannot throw another touchdown pass in his career with Notre Dame, and it's fine with me. I'll be a Drew Pine fan for the rest of my life for that, because it was like times are changing from some of the late 90s and early 2000s Notre Dame days where like celebrating and being happy and joyous was like frowned upon by so much of Notre Dame Stadium staff and fans. Like, it's nice and pleasant to see that. But it's just, I think that there are similarities there. Guys, you can tell Pine gets on the field, there's a different energy with the entire offense. There just is. And part of that is like we were talking about earlier with, okay, well, he's a combination of he can throw and he can pass. What a concept. Wow, not just have something predictability. What a thought. But like having that out there, when you have that and it energizes an entire offense and you're like, damn, we might actually be able to get the ball down the field and put some points on the board with this guy. It makes everyone else that much better right away, instantaneously. And it's like, how many times do we have to watch it until it's made official. And I know that Brian Kelly didn't say anything today. He had to talk to his players and make sure everyone knows what's going on. I mean, I will be in absolute shock, stunned, and whatever is left of me will be full of anger and rage if he's not starting Saturday at Virginia Tech in Drew Pine, that is.
Well, here's what I'll say to what you were saying about, some of those similarities between, the career trajectories of Ian Book and so far with Drew Pine. What does it say about Notre Dame's coaching staff that guys that are just winners that, Ian Book won, like I say, I just mentioned it, won the most of any quarterback in Notre Dame history. Okay. What does it say that these are the guys that are constantly overlooked? And you bring in obviously a Jack Cohn, and I get why they brought in Jack Cohn. I really do. But and then you flirt around with this whole Tyler Buckner thing. Like, why? I don't know. It feels like Notre Dame misses isn't the word, I don't think, when we're talking about like misses on the quarterback situation, but it just sort of seems it's like, why do we never just get it right the first time, hit the nail on the head, knock it out of the park, whatever euphemism you want to use there. Like, why is this the team that I like is really what it boils down to. But why can't they ever get it right?
I mean, the examples from Brian Kelly's career is even going back to Cincinnati. He did it with X number of quarterbacks. Some of that was injury reasons or otherwise, but like Golson and Reese. It started way back in 2012. And then it was Zaire and Kaiser. Yes, that was injury related, but just
hell, it was Chris and
I forgot his first
Nate Montana.
Forgot, his first year here
before Reese. Yeah,
the history is crazy. And the thing with I get Cohn, but the problem is 5 games in, the one thing Cohn was supposed to provide, he's not providing. And yes, part of that is the offensive line, obviously, but it's not there. And I posted this question, and you might have seen it, Nick and Ben, after game 1. What's the bigger story? Jack Cohn throwing for 366 or our defense looking suspect? Everybody said the defense looking suspect. And I said, I don't think so, not even a little bit, because the things that the defense looks suspect with are correctable. It was missed tackles. It was poor personnel, poor alignment. We need Cohn to do that every game. That's the story. And if Cohn isn't doing that every game, we have problems. And here we are 4 games later, Cohn wasn't doing it, and it slowly fizzled out to where we lost, and now he's probably not even going to be the guy. And it's, like you said, with the Cohn situation to me is maybe not as obvious because he hasn't been in the program. Kelly had a short window, and Tommy Reese had a short window to really look at him. But why is it no fail since 2010 to now, the first quarterback's never the last quarterback in a given season? It makes no sense.
Well, yeah, Ian Book excluded, but you're exactly right, and it is frustrating. It's so maddening. You look at it. If you just simply were to put, if you were to look at this and you were to just simply put, I don't know, not even last year's offensive line, but just put in average, whatever your average offensive line would be in college football on this team. It doesn't matter if it's Jack Cohn quarterback. It doesn't matter if it's Tyler Buckner. It doesn't matter if it's Drew Pine as your starting quarterback. If your offensive line was just average, this is a 5-0 team. This is a team that you're probably saying is in the running for the best ever under Brian Kelly because they have so many other good things going for them. It's just that the offense gets hampered because, like we talked about, okay, your running backs you can't hand off the ball, you can't throw them because they have to sit in pass protection. You're running 2-man, 3-man routes because everything is reserved for pass protection. Your offensive line can't run blocks. So Kyron Williams, it's not to say he's being wasted right now, but man, you feel like he's getting cheated for what's probably going to be his final year at Notre Dame. And it's like, if you just had something average there, competent there on that front, this could be a really stinking good team because they have up the talent level and the rest of places. Unfortunately, they've regressed mightily at a mighty important one.
Yeah, because we're picking our quarterback and deciding on a quarterback not based on the quarterback itself, but it's how does that quarterback mask or benefit from the lack of offensive line. We're doing it backwards. We should be picking the quarterback because of how we can run the offense. We're picking our quarterback because our offensive line doesn't allow the quarterback who could probably run this offense the best if everything is in place, which is probably Jack Cohn. Because, you know what I'm saying? Like, you follow me, right? We're doing this reverse, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And you got Michael Mayer hopping around on one leg at this point, which was sad to see. But that dude is trying his hardest to keep this team in the game. And you just think, like you just said, if our team was the offensive line that we kind of expected with a bunch of 4-star dudes, Mayer's probably not playing in, after halftime in several of the first few games if they went the way they should have gone. And his groin issue isn't what it is today. Mm-hmm. I don't want to connect dots and try to, but I feel like that could be a thing. But yeah, between Lindsey and Austin and Davis, who stepped up tremendously yet again, and Mayer and Tyree and Williams, it's like they are getting so underutilized. And then Marcus Freeman, after one game, they got a little better in 2 games, got a little better in 3 games. Games 4 and 5, he's been borderline perfect. And we have nothing to show for it.
And my question then, and it's a rhetorical one, but my question then is, how in the world does a place like Notre Dame not even have an average offensive line? How does Notre Dame not even have an average offensive line in its second string is really the question I feel like is more appropriate, because at Notre Dame, you should have an above average offensive line. And then if all 5 guys get hurt, the next 5 guys that come in should be a pretty average offensive line. But anyway, like I say, that's a rhetorical because we already talked about that. But I don't know. I'm just going to kind of give my final thoughts, and I'll let you guys kind of do the same. As we wrap the show, then, I guess to kind of sum up everything that we've said and my thoughts on this season was, I've said in previous podcasts that maybe what we end up appreciating about this team is how they grow and evolve and where they were from start to finish and that type of thing. I think it would have been, everybody knew of the things that were hampering us through the first couple of games. And, I think I and just about anybody that watched Notre Dame football thought it was going to catch up to us eventually. I just never thought it was going to catch up to us and just like grab us, throw us under the water, hold us down, drown. Like, I just didn't think it was going to be just such a debacle the way that Saturday was. I just didn't think it was going to be that bad. I had thoughts that, Notre Dame could drop this game against Cincinnati or could play bad against, a USC team that has an interim coach for like the 55th time in the Brian Kelly era, who always comes in and plays hard against Notre Dame and plays well against Notre Dame, regardless of what their coaching situation is. So, like I say, I thought that, that it was going to catch up to us. These things, the offensive line wasn't going to be able to patchwork itself through 12 wins this season, but just the way it looked Saturday and, some, in my opinion, bad coaching decisions and just plays that you don't expect from 5th-year seniors. Like, I just didn't think it was going to look that bad. And I hope genuinely that like this is the low point for Notre Dame football this year. Because if it gets worse than this, I don't want to watch, to be honest with you. So, I think I'm hopeful that this is the low point. I'm hopeful that this is a wake-up call of sorts, as losses tend to be. As bad as things are, if you're still winning, certain things don't, especially, and I'm talking from like a player's perspective here, not necessarily a coaching staff perspective, but, now and I think if you asked any player on the Notre Dame football team, it's like, yeah, now our eyes are really open. It was all kind of okay still because we were 4-0. Now definitely you've got our attention. And I hope that's what this does, honestly. I didn't think Notre Dame was going to go out and win a national title this year. And at the end of the day, a loss to Cincinnati is a loss to a top 10 team. And, you still have the opportunity to go 11-1, 10-2, whatever the situation is, if you improve. And that's what you expect out of Brian Kelly, out of the players, out of everything, the program that you've built. And so that's still a thing. But it's unfortunate, and I'll just kind of leave it with this. It's unfortunate that I'm not positive that this isn't something that's going to, not be something that galvanizes us. Is this a case where, what's the year where Everett Golson was the quarterback and they lose to Florida State and then they lose 5 of 6 down the
14,
stretch?
yeah.
14. Yeah, 14.
I hope this isn't that, I guess is what I'm getting at in a roundabout way. And, with that, I'll kind of just, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you compare it to 14, like, that was also, you got to remember, by the end of, what was it? It was a year that pretty much no linebackers were healthy by the end of it. You had Jalen Smith playing with a bunch of Joe Schmitz and other beat-up guys. Nothing, not a knock on those guys, just it wasn't a whole lot left there.
The Dan Fox year?
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
But I look at this year, and I think that the biggest wake-up call maybe that this brings is that the margin for error when something is as bad as it is, where Notre Dame's offensive line is in that category, and right now you don't have an answer at quarterback. You do when you play Florida State, because Florida State is a disaster right now, even though they just got by Syracuse finally. Like, you can get by against real weak opponents with those situations, but just Notre Dame's going to be more talented. I think they're more talented than Cincinnati this past week. I think they're more talented than every team they're going to play, top to bottom, on their roster. Like I said earlier, I think that this is a team that you compare it, they're about as deep at about every position as they've ever been under Brian Kelly, except offensive line and except quarterback. And I guess tight ends too, because you have Michael Mayer that might be the best of the bunch that have played under Kelly, but you don't have necessarily the same depth that you've had in other years, like last year specifically. But you have top-tier talent, obviously, at that position. It's just your margin for error is so small. You're not going to go put 40 points on a scoreboard regularly. You're not going to put 30 points on a scoreboard regularly. So you have to be able to pressure like crazy on the defense to perform week in and week out. It's like they're not going to be allowed to have a bad week, not going to be allowed to have an off week. You want 11 wins to become a reality. You want to be playing in a New Year's Six bowl and make something significant of this. And you can still go play for that. You can still win a major bowl game for the first time in 25, 27 years, whatever it's been. Okay. It's better than nothing, but your margin for error in this is just so small. And Saturday was, if you weren't buying into that thought already, it's a pleasant wake-up call for when you miss on something that's so obvious, like they have missed on here, in terms of developing the line and having a quarterback situation solved or resolved. There's going to be a lot more of these things that are going to be a lot of kind of described as ugly wins along the way to what hopefully is a 10, 11 win regular season.
Yeah, I still think 10, 11 wins is not – it's obviously the goal, but I think it's more realistic than some people want to make it out to be because our remaining schedule isn't as daunting as maybe it was once perceived to be. I think the biggest thing is, and I say it on my show jokingly, but I don't know how else to explain it. Tommy Rees is almost playing bingo up in the booth because there are certain things that don't make sense unless you're trying to check a certain box, like bringing in Tyler Buckner after X number of successful plays doing either a certain thing, passing the ball, or with a certain player, Drew Pine, and then you just throw it in there because – or last week, you run 6 consecutive pass plays. You get in the red zone. You don't bring in Buckner, but then you just had to run the ball. Like, are you trying to just check off certain boxes for that's what you're calling a successful game plan? Because that would make a difference because we've squandered so many points already. And like you said, the margin for error is so small. And while I do believe we are better than USC and Virginia Tech and North Carolina and even Stanford at the end of the year, they still have Division I athletes and players, and USC and UNC specifically have recruited well enough that they're going to do what Cincinnati did to us if we make those similar mistakes. Having said that, I don't know how the three of us, my dad on Saturday, and are seeing what we're seeing. And I know it's easier said than done. I get that. But there's got to be an effort, a visual effort to work around and avoid the deficiencies as best possible, like screen passes, like misdirection, like even a simple swing pass to Tyree, where, yeah, he's going to catch the ball 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, but I trust him one-on-one with potentially a linebacker or a defensive back versus trying to shove a 5'8", 170 guy between the tackles. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's the stuff I'm talking about. And if we can recognize those things, because I think our defense is going to show up to play, and if we just have a sense of awareness, look in the mirror, self-reflection on what works, what do we have, how do we use it, and I feel like why it hasn't happened yet, probably because we were still winning. Now we've lost. So with Virginia Tech and then USC and then North Carolina, we got to see those changes. And if I do, right now I'm like, yeah, 10 wins is likely. If I see an improvement in Virginia Tech, I would almost go to say guarantee 10 wins. But if we see the same nonsense and God forbid Cone comes out as the starting quarterback, then you could be looking at 8-4. But I do believe 10, 11 wins just because the teams, including ourselves, are not what we thought we were going to be or what we thought they were going to be, really allows us to still get to that mark.
Yeah, well, my dog just broke into the office, and so I think that's my cue to sign this thing out. Like, Dad, you've talked about Notre Dame for enough today. It's time to pay me attention. So, guys, thanks for joining me for this round. Always good. I know it's the second time we got the three of us together, and I think it was a really good episode. Listeners, thanks for listening. If you made it to this point, check us out everywhere you find your podcast: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all that stuff. Make sure you check out Nick and Mike and all the things that they do. We'll make sure that we link their work and stuff into the podcast description. Like I say, some really good Notre Dame talk, and two of the best guys to talk about when it comes to talk with when it comes to talking about Notre Dame football. So thanks, guys, for that. So
Thank you, Ben.
we'll talk to you in the near future. And hopefully next time it's after a win, after a revitalization and a galvanization of the Notre Dame football team. And so, like I say, thanks for listening. And until next time, go Irish.
Go Irish.
Go Irish.